Hi, everyone, and welcome to our first chat for The Book Thief. And we're going to get started in about a minute or so. I'll give everyone a chance to join us today. While you're waiting for us to get started with our Book Thief chat, feel free to pop on over to the Princess Bride page over on Edmodo. There's one final that we would love everyone to answer. If you haven't had a chance to answer it yet, hop on over to that Princess Bride tab on Edmodo and answer that question. If you scroll down past those kind of 3 video chats there, you'll see that Nick Madsen has posted the final question. And that final question is, William Goldman had a unique style for writing this novel. He wrote in asides. He pretended there was an S. Morgenstern that originally wrote the novel. He wrote many things that turned a traditional fairy tale on its head. Now, did you appreciate these style choices? Do you think that made the book? So while we're kind of waiting to get started with The Book Thief, answer that Princess Bride final question. And if you answer that question, you do get a free copy of The Book Thief. So right here, a free copy of The Book Thief, which we will be discussing all month long in March. And it looks like we've got some great answers so far. So I will discuss those in just a second. Let's see. And also on the Book Thief tab, just go ahead and log in and let me know when you're here. Oh, it looks like Megan's here. Hi, Megan. Hi. All right. Now that I know that some people are here and logged in, we can kind of get started chatting about the Book Thief. I really, really loved the Book Thief. So it's gonna be a half an hour chat today, but I'm just warning you, I may go over. Oh, another thing, remember last I talked about the Princess Bride with you guys? I was like 50 getting started because I thought I was like recording myself, and I talked for 10 or 15 minutes to just nothing. So if you could also let me know, I'm feeling a little insecure. So if you could let me know on Edmodo if you can see me and if you can hear me, and you can see me and hear me. Okay, I apologize for that kind of double playing technical glitch that happened. I was feeling so confident, you guys, when I logged on. Like, I was like, oh, I got this. It's working perfectly. And then there was one little glitch, but it looks like we have it so far. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start out those Princess Bride answers. We're going to begin today talking a little bit about the Princess Bride. And I'm going to pop on over and see on Edmodo those answers that you had on the Princess Bride. If we scroll way down here. So again, the question is, William Goldman had a unique style for writing this novel. He wrote in asides. He pretended there was an S. Morgenstern that originally wrote the novel. He wrote many things that turned a traditional fairy tale. Did you appreciate these styles? Do you think that made the book better? Why or why not? And Chloe said that she thinks that it made, because then it was like it was getting narrated by 2 different people. Yeah, I liked that too. And what I kind of liked was the back and forth, really, almost those little asides, how it was almost in a way kind of that between the characters, and that Goldman had his own take on what in the book was happening. And Zach said it was a very good book. I agree, Zach. I loved it. I thought it was hilarious. And Brooke said she thought it made the book better because it gave us a greater insight into the author's brain and the thoughts that he had about the book. And it makes him a better author because he not only had to write an amazing book, he also had to add things in that never happened. And he basically created a fictional version of himself. Brooke, I love that because he did. He invented that son that he never had when he really had 2 daughters. He created, this whole fictional version of himself that was a little askew from who he was in real life. Oh, that's perfect. All right. Oh, thank you guys for telling me you can see me and hear me. That is perfect. Okay, so let's get started on our chat. Let's pop back on over to the Book Thief tab on Edmodo, and we're going to get started talking about the Book Thief. I think this is a magnificent book. There are so many layers. There's so much going on. And what I thought was really interesting, when you first start reading the book, one of the very first lines is, Here is a small fact. You are going to die. What a great opening line that is. It's like the fourth line down in the book. What a great way to open, grabs you. And it's true, we're all mortal. My first question right off the bat, what did you think by telling the reader you're going to die someday? And especially considering this is a young adult novel. This is a novel meant for people who aren't even 18 yet. They're not even adults yet. So what did you think of the book? And I'm going to post that on Edmodo right now. So here we go. What did you think of the book opening by telling the reader they're going to die someday, especially since this is meant for readers, even adults yet? So I'm going to go ahead and post that because that's kind of, it's a very unusual way to open a book. So I was very, very curious about how you guys felt reading that. All right. So while you guys are getting a chance to post your responses there and talk about what you thought about that opening, I thought I would tell you kind of my thoughts on that opening. So last month we read what was really a comical, lighthearted book, The Princess Bride. But The Book Thief is a much more serious novel, and it's about a much more serious topic. It's about World War II, specifically World War II in Germany and the Holocaust that was going on during that time. So my thoughts on this opening, warning you that you are going to die someday, telling you, reminding you of your own, you're going to die someday, is it's about death. This novel is letting you know right from the beginning, and the narrator is actually death also. So this book is telling you right from the beginning, this is a book about death. And World War II was a time of massive and widespread death. And young people were often the victims. There are no exact figures over how many people died in World War II. And it's estimated 1 million to 80 million people died in World War II. Now those are soldiers, civilian casualties, disease, and famine as a result of World War II. And of that number, around 5 million to 6 million people who died during World War II were Jewish. And that was because they were specifically targeted by Germany as part of the Holocaust. So, and then of those 5 to 6 million Jewish people who died during the Holocaust, 1.5 million of them were children. So what this book is telling you right away is that it's set in a time of widespread death, widespread suffering, and a lot of that suffering was with children. One thing that's always struck me about World War II is how many stories there are that were told by kids your age. One of the most famous one was Anne Frank. She was your age, and she was Jewish, and she had to be hidden during World War II so that she and her family wouldn't be sent to a concentration camp. And while she was there, she wrote her diary. She kept a diary. She did not know that it was going to become internationally famous, but she kept a diary, and she wrote in it every day about her time spent hiding so that she and her family would not be sent to a concentration camp. And unfortunately, just before the end of the war, her family was found, and they were sent to a camp, and she died shortly before the end of World War II. But her diary went on to be published, and it became internationally famous. This young girl who was middle school aged wrote this diary, and it touched people's hearts because one of the most famous lines in it is, "Above all this, I still believe that people are good at heart." And that resonated with a lot of people. So The Book Thief, it's not the lighthearted novel that we read last month. It's about a much more serious topic, and it really wants you to know that right away. And, you know, because death is the narrator in this, it's really tempting to think that this is going to be a fantasy novel because you have this death, you have death as a figure, that kind of Grim Reaper figure as a narrator. So you think that it's going to be a fantasy novel, but it's not. It's all of these things that were really, that are happening. So the characters are fictional. Liesel is fictional. Her foster parents, they're fictional, but there are real figures in this. Adolf Hitler was real. The invasion of Poland by Germany that happens while Liesel is beating up that kid on the playground, that was a real thing. Kristallnacht was the night of broken glass. That's when a bunch of Jewish businesses and homes were destroyed, and that happened on November 9th, 1938. So when Liesel is walking down the street of yellow stars and she sees all of those Jewish homes that have been destroyed, those were things that were actually happening. So while we have these fictional characters, they're living in through times that really actually happened. Okay, so let's go back. I see some responses to my. All right. Let's see here. Okay, we've got quite a few. So Brooke said that it drew her in and it made her want to read. Zach said to remind the readers that they're mortal, not live forever. Megan says she thinks it's perfectly fine because young adults should already know that they're going to die someday. Jordan disagrees. Jordan thinks that the a little strong at the beginning of the book. And Jordan says, I mean, we know they are going to die, but is it soon, in 2 years? When? It leaves you wondering. Yeah, we're actually going to talk about one aspect of that a little bit later. And Jefferson said, it made me think that everything you do, nothing will make you live forever. That's interesting. Yeah, so of all the things that we do in life, no matter what we accomplish or where we go, nothing will make you live forever. But yeah, I like that. That's very interesting. All right. And also, oh, it looks like Zach posted a question up at the top, so be sure to respond to Zach's question. Zach wants to know who your favorite character is so far. Yeah, and you know, one thing I'm really curious about is what do you guys think of Rosa? That's Liesel's foster mother. What are your opinions on Rosa? Because she's a very interesting character. So I'll continue with my discussion, but be sure to keep posting your answers there. Oh, there's already some answers. Brooke likes Hans and Rudy. Oh my gosh, I love Hans and I love Rudy for two totally different ways. Like, I'd love to be friends with Rudy, and Hans is such a wonderful father and such a really generous, incredible, loving man. And we'll talk more about that later. All right, so let's see here. Okay, so I wanted to tell you a little bit about when they're walking down the road of yellow stars, and you may know this already. So in Germany during this time, there were a bunch of laws that were passed that were made specifically to target Jewish people. And one of those was that Jews had to be identified by wearing a yellow Star of David on their clothes. This way, everyone they passed knew that they were the most targeted group in Germany, and there was no escaping, there was no hiding. They were clearly labeled. It was a law, and there were a lot of laws passed against Jews. They couldn't own radios, for example. So then the laws became increasingly harsh. More and more laws were passed, and it got successively harder and harder and more violent and incredibly dangerous at that time. So the reason when Liesel is walking to school with Rudy, they walk down the road of yellow stars, and it's the road of yellow stars because those are all Jewish homes there. All right, so we're gonna go on to my next question. Oh, let's see. Yeah. A lot of people are also chiming in that they love Hans. Yeah, I really love Hans, and I think he's a fantastic character. Okay, I have this is question here about Liesel. What do you think of Liesel stealing books? So we're taught from the beginning, you know, we're taught of our lives, we're taught it's wrong to steal. But is stealing ever justified? And I have a lot of questions about how things are justified in this book and what sorts of actions are justified and not justified. So one of those is it wrong to steal books? Is Liesel wrong to steal books? Or in her case, is stealing justified? Why is she justified or not justified in stealing books? So I basically either yes or no. But more than that, I want to know why. How do you feel? How do you connect? Do you understand why Liesel is stealing these books? How do you feel about it? So I'm going to go ahead and post that on Edmodo. Okay. Megan wants to know, who do you think the antagonist is right now? I love that question, Megan, because so far, you know, there are a couple like antagonists that are emerging. And for me personally, I think one of the big antagonists might be the German government. Let me know if you agree with that. There are also quite a few other options for antagonists in there. I like that, Megan. I like that a lot. Okay, let's see here. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Liesel. Authors are very deliberate when there is a choice that the author makes, including the names of the characters. So I looked up what the meaning of Liesel is, and Liesel is short for the German version of the name Elizabeth. And Liesel means God is my oath. And I really started thinking about that because an oath is like a solemn promise or a vow, but more than that, when you swear an oath, it's implied that it's the truth. And it's more than a promise, more than the truth, more than the vow. An oath is very solemn, very sacred. It's honesty, it's the truth, it's your honor, basically. The name implies honesty and seriousness and righteousness. And then I started thinking about the other names for Liesel in this book. And Death calls Liesel the book thief. And in fact, that's how she's referred to in the very title of the book. That's how she's known, is the book thief. So I was curious about what you guys thought about different names because, and I'm going to totally butcher this because I don't speak German, but Rosa calls her Sauerkurl, that really, because Rosa swears all the time, and she calls Liesel that very insulting name. So Rosa's nickname for her foster daughter is very insulting, as is Rosa's entire manner towards Liesel. But Death, the narrator, tells us that Rosa loves her. And we even see that love for her in the moment where Liesel admits she took the washing money to mail to her mother. We see Rosa kind of soften towards her. So I had a question about names for you guys that I'll post on Edmodo as well. And how much influence does someone's name have on their personality or their life? Can a person feel like they need to live up to their name? Like, let's say they're named after an ancestor or a famous person. Does a name like that come with a lot of responsibility? Or in the case of that insulting nickname that Rosa has given her, can you feel the need to live down to a name? Can someone's nickname for a person affect how that person acts? Or in your case, has a bad experience with someone ever ruined that name for you and affected how you feel about other people with that name? So I'm going to go ahead and post that. And then let's scroll down really quickly and see any more answers here. Okay, so to my question about is it wrong to steal books, Brooke says it isn't wrong because she is saving literature and not doing any harm. She is helping herself by learning how to read and keeping the books from the Nazis. Jefferson says, nope, it's not. Books are either information or these things humanity should share for free. And Zach wonders what her motive is. And Megan says it is wrong because stealing is bad unless you are stealing directly from Hitler. Which in a way, when she steals from that massive book burning, which by the way, those happened, you guys, all over Germany during World War II, books were burned by the thousands, and that hurts my librarian heart. I mean, they destroyed information, particularly because it was written by people they considered dangerous. So, you know, they started out first by eliminating the information, eliminating the words that those people spoke, especially Jewish authors. And when that wasn't enough, they tried to eliminate the people themselves. So it started with the words, and then it went to the attempt to eliminate the people themselves. All right, and then I'm going to read some answers to Megan's question about who we think the antagonist is. And Zach says the Germans, especially the Fuhrer, especially Hitler, the Nazis, totally the Fuhrer and the Germans. I think we're all in agreement there. That an antagonist, whole group of people. So it's specifically the Fuhrer. But remember, guys, Hitler was not acting alone. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. Hitler was not acting alone. He had a lot of government officials, local officials. And on one page it says, in 1933, 90% of Germans supported him. So there were a lot of people, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. There were a lot of people supporting him. So while Hitler is kind of, we see that figurehead of the Nazis, and he's representative of the German government and the Nazis that are the antagonists at that time. We have a group of antagonists, almost a whole mass movement that's acting as the antagonist in this book, which is interesting. It's different than what we've seen in some of the other books that we've read. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about how Liesel's life is very much tied to World War II, not just because she's surrounded by it, she's living in it, she's living through these very dangerous, dark times, but her life really kind of mirrors Germany's path here. They're very much parallel. So, for example, the day that Germany invades Poland is the day that Liesel triumphs on the playground against Tommy Mueller. So the day that Germany triumphs against Poland is the day that Liesel triumphs on the playground. Or even walking to school. On her way to get the first real education of her life, when Rudy is walking her to school, this is going to be a big moment for Liesel. It's the first education she's going to receive in her life. Prior to that, it's been totally sporadic and she can't even read. But on her way to get that sort of school education, she sees the road of yellow stars for the first time, and she's getting an education, even though she may not realize it yet. She's getting one of her first on what happens to those who are targeted by the German government, by the Nazis, by the Fuhrer. She's seeing action as she's walking down the road of yellow stars. And that brings me to my next point, because she's seeing what's happening to those who are being targeted by the German government. And we see later that might include her mother. So the next thing I wanted to talk about in this book is foreshadowing. So you guys probably already know what foreshadowing is. It's a literary device that warns readers, teases them about future events, about things that will happen to the characters. But you'll only notice it if you're paying attention. They're breadcrumbs that the author leaves through the book that kind of can tell you ahead of time what might be happening to the characters. So when Liesel is walking down the road on her way to get education, she's passing the road of yellow stars and getting an education on what happens to those who may oppose the German government, as she'll later discover might be happening to her mother. And then another example of foreshadowing is on page 27, that man who stays in the car with Liesel when she has been taken to her foster parents. He's described as like a last resort. She's not sure why he's there. He might be there to drag her into the house if she refuses. He's there as a last resort, or the words the author uses here. He's also called the final solution. And that is foreshadowing as well, because the final solution is what the Nazis called their plan towards the end of the war to kill all of the Jews in all of the countries that they controlled, all the Jewish people. So to send them to concentration camps, but a better word for a concentration camp is a death camp. So the author uses those words, the final solution, on page as early as page 27, and those words are not accidental. He's using them to just describe this man who is there to deliver Liesel to her foster parents, but the final solution was a widespread death plan for millions of people, millions of Jewish people. And that leads me to, actually, we'll take a quick pause here because I want to see some more of your answers. Oh, Megan, you right there, you almost hit on my next point. And actually, I was going to say earlier here on one of the earlier questions here, somebody had a great example of foreshadowing because, Brooke, when you responded to the is it wrong to steal the books questions, when you said she's helping herself by learning how to read and she's keeping those books from the Nazis and saving literature. She's saving literature. I liked that point where you said she's saving literature, because later we'll see that's a bit of foreshadowing, because like how I said, where it started with the destruction of people's words and then people's homes and businesses, and then it went on to the actual destruction of people. Liesel starts out the same way, by saving literature, and then maybe we'll see her later on. There's been some foreshadowing about a man coming to live in their basement. Maybe we'll see later on how it goes from saving literature, saving words, saving information, to saving people. All right, and some answers. So how much does someone's name on their personality or their life, like that question, living down to a name, living up to a name, responsibility, and can a bad experience ruin a name for you? That has been ruined because Hitler was born on the same day that she was born. And she said she thinks you need to feel like you need to live up to or down to your name. April 20th is Hitler's birthday. And yeah, that day it does. He's overshadowed it. Yeah, so I'm sorry about that, Brooke. And then said that someone to their name, a nickname can affect how someone asks, and so far how someone acts, and so far the last one has not happened yet. Yeah, and you can see it in the even though Liesel is constantly insulted by Rosa, it has affected their relationship, but Liesel still acts how she wants to act. And Megan says a name does affect a personality a lot. And then Megan's had a great question up at the top. Who is worse, Hitler or Hitler's followers? And that's actually going to be one of my next points that we're going to talk about. So thank you, Megan, for bringing that up. I'm going to scroll down here and see new answers. All right, looks like we're all caught up here. So yeah, Megan, you ask who is worse, Hitler or Hitler's followers? So on page, this, as soon as I read this, I knew this was something I wanted to talk about. This really stuck with me. So it's after Liesel's brother dies, right at the beginning of the book on pages 22 and 23, makes an observation. So there were the pair of train guards that were trying to figure out what to do with grieving Liesel and her grieving mother and the dead baby brother. And then there are the pair of grave diggers and Liesel, who are burying Liesel's brother. And Death makes an observation. It says, a pair of guards, a pair of grave diggers. When it came down to it, one of them called the shots. The other did what he was told. The question is, what if the other, and other here is italicized, we're supposed to pay attention. What if the other is a lot more than one? And I want you guys to remember this as we're reading the book. So the other did what he was told. He just did what he was told. It was just followers. Is what if the other was a lot more than one? What if it was a lot more than one person who did just what he was told? So after the true extent of the Holocaust was uncovered, so estimates say as many as 6 million Jewish people were murdered as part of the Holocaust. And in addition, so of those, 1.5 million were children who were murdered, Jewish children. And in addition to that, communists also, people who were disabled, children who were disabled, and anyone who was different, the Roma, were also targeted. So millions and millions of people were targeted because they were different or considered by the Nazis to be inferior and inferior to what the Nazis considered to be a supreme race of people. After the true horrific extent of the Holocaust was uncovered, people asked these soldiers and these politicians and even the people who lived in towns that were near these death camps, they said, how did you not know what was going on, or how could you do this? And one of the common refrains that was heard was, we were just following orders. So that is that line on page 23 or 22 and 23. The other did what he was told. That's what a lot of people claim. They were just doing what they were told. So the question is, what if the other was a lot more? So, but they just did what they were told. But we know that's not true of everyone, because like it says on page 63, in 1933, 90% of Germans, Hitler. 90% is not 100%. 90% still leaves 10% of people who did not support the Nazi regime. They did not support Hitler. They did not support the Fuhrer. So that leaves 10%. People like Hans, people like Liesel's foster father, who risked really his livelihood and his life. He painted over that hateful graffiti that was put on Jewish homes, and because of that, he wasn't admitted into the Nazi Party, which affected his livelihood. And like when he walks away and he hears them say, you know, we're never letting him in, he took a risk. And we'll see, and there's been some foreshadowing, like I said before, about risks he's even more willing to take. He stands up to his own son. He loses a relationship with his own son because he's following his conscience. He's not just following orders. He's not just doing what he's told. He's doing what he believes in his heart to be right. So we will see Hans becoming even more defiant in a time when going in masses was an incredibly dangerous thing to do. So the more we see a few people not following those orders to exterminate other human beings, to murder them, to commit genocide, which is the destruction of an entire group of people, the more we see a few people resisting that, it makes us question those people who used the excuse of just doing what they were told. So I have a question for you based on that, which is I was just do is what I was told, an okay excuse for doing something wrong. So that's my next question there. All right, and then, all right, I'm reading through here. Megan has a question about what sauerkraut means. Said to look it up on Google. Seriously, you don't want to know. It's not nice. It's not nice. Yeah, and Brooke makes the point that Hitler thought that normal and right was to have blonde hair and blue eyes. But Hitler doesn't have either of those. That is an excellent point, Brooke. All right, let's see if there are any. I'm going to refresh here. Any more responses? We're going a few minutes past 5 because, again, I got started a few minutes late with that awkward moment at the beginning where I was trying to figure out why it was double playing in the background. All right, so responses to who is are Hitler's followers. Zach says the followers because they are okay with these kinds of things. And Brooke agrees. In all caps, she wrote Hitler's followers. And she said because they have chosen this path and they follow a horrible leader. So it comes down to choice, doesn't it? Yeah. You can make a choice. We have free will. You can make a choice, and they've chosen to follow him. Let's see if there are any more answers here. Looks like, yeah, everybody thinks that the Nazis are the antagonists. Everybody really loves Hans. So feel free. Also, I'm really curious what you guys think about Rosa. She's a very complicated character. She works very hard to support her family, but then at the same time, she treats Liesl in a way that today we wouldn't think is right, but in her mind, she's doing the best she can. She's disciplining her to keep her on the right track, and Death, the narrator, who's what we would call a omniscient narrator, all-knowing, all-seeing, he says that Rosa loves Liesl. So we'll have to. I want to hear what you guys think about her. All right, so I have another question for you, just as kind of a wrap up here. When we hear about the incident, which Jesse Owens was a real person, there's actually a movie that just came out about him. Jesse Owens was an amazing track star and an Olympian, and yet swept the Olympics in Germany, and Hitler refused to shake his hand. He won gold medals and Hitler refused to shake his hand, and it was really considered kind of a triumph. And there were these debates about whether or not, because Jesse Owens was black, and so there were these debates about whether or not he should go and compete in Berlin at the Olympics during that time, in a time of increased violence against anyone who wasn't considered Aryan, who didn't have that blonde hair and blue eyes. And at the same time back in America, Jesse Owens was facing discrimination here, because this was in the 1930s when there was widespread discrimination against African Americans, and there was civil rights movement that happened in the 60s. And so Jesse Owens was facing discrimination here, and he was facing a lot of challenges and decisions about whether or not he should go to Germany. And he went, and he won gold medals. and he really impacted like Rudy. And so Liesl wasn't there when Rudy dressed up as Jesse Owens and he ran his race, and Rudy ran his race. But she heard the story so much that in her memory, it felt like she had actually been there. So I was curious, have any of you ever heard a story so much it felt like you were there, even though you weren't? Has someone else's memory or experience become part of your own? Like, I know for me, I've heard so many stories about my parents growing up, and I've been to see where they grew up, that when I picture their childhoods, I can see myself there as part of it. So I would love to hear your answers on that. So I'm going to go ahead and post that. And I'm going to go ahead and refresh. And we will see here if there are any answers. Okay, so what I asked is I was just doing what I was told an okay excuse for doing something wrong? And Brooke says, never, because if you are following orders by a bad person, that makes it bad. Megan says, nope, you don't let bad people boss you around. And Zach says, doing what you're told is not really a bad thing if it was a good order. Right, if it's, you know, somebody telling you to do your homework or to read your book for a book club, things like that. So if the order is bad, if it's a bad order, I was just doing what I was told and okay. Sometimes instructions, you know, they're there for a reason. They're there to teach us and guide us by people who are wiser and more experienced than we are. And it becomes kind of a tough line to walk because, yeah, there are good orders that are there, good instructions, good laws that keep us safe, that keep society going, that are there to teach us and protect us. And so you kind of have to start navigating what are the good orders and the bad orders. And that's really what this book comes down to, is people are the laws they choose to follow, and recognizing when their leaders are wrong and when it's time to defy laws and rulings that are wrong, to discern between those good orders, those good laws that are good for a society, and the bad things that start happening, the destruction of an entire group of people or groups of people. Okay, so our next will be next Thursday, and it will be at 4:30, and it will be on the next section of The Book Thief. Thank you guys so much. It was really great to hear your responses. I know you are going to have some incredibly deep insights and wonderful things to say about this book, and I'm really looking forward to hearing all that you have to say, all that you think, and how much you connect with this book and what you think of it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing your discussions and hearing your thoughts in person, because I think we'll have a lot to say about this book. So thank you so very much for taking the time to hang out with me this afternoon, and I will see you next time.